Attention, please. The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. This is a THI special and a must listen to show when two worlds collide 2.3. Enjoy the show. Hi all and welcome to tonight's show, and tonight's show will be a mental roller coaster and may require a number of listens to get a grasp of it. We've done many booming must listen to shows and many Thursdays ones as well this year, given the feedback I've been receiving each week. Last Thursday's penultimate piece was an example, and the race and gender piece the week previously, of not only an increase in your knowledge database, but the ease in which you received and accepted fairly controversial statements and narrative that too few are willing to take on. You have all come so far in not only grasping the information, but understanding it, as dot after dot now is getting and being connected, to allow for the bigger picture to flow and be seen. This show will test you again and will tie together 5 or 6 different topics covered in our shows over several years into a package you will be able to have a greater understanding of. Don't be too harsh on yourselves if it doesn't sink in at first. There is much to take in and absorb. The interconnectedness of it all will be hard to sink in from an audio perspective, and I have prepared a visual perspective of drawings and some pictures to aid you all with the visual aspect of it all. And I ask you all, come sail away with me. Right, let's get into the show. We have explained in the past about the Mobius loop and how they did it. And for new members, essentially they wrapped humanity, other beings and this planet into a perpetual harvesting loops that played the movie Groundhog Day over and over for 78,000 years. For visual terms, it looks like the egg timer as the sands of time pass through. With an egg timer, when it first starts, it begins to filter through slowly. That is the perception. But as it gets lower down the top vortex and near the twist, which is the void, where all and nothing exists, it begins to speed up. We are near that void now, and it is why time is now appearing to speed up. Essentially, as you started the egg timer, a sequence of events at the beginning would take 1.5 million years. The next ring of, say, 1 million years, all those sequence of events in the 1.5 million year time span would now take place within the 1 million year time span. And as you go through the rings, the events that took place globally and in sequence is now unfolding in a shorter and shorter time span. The Mayans or Mexicans would call these Bactunes. The final Bactune is around 13 years in duration. So all the events that originally took 1.5 million years to complete is now unfolding within a 13-year time span, which then gives the impression that time is speeding up as everything is happening at once. I first warned of this back in 2017, that the following years would feel like time has sped up, and that time would make less sense. Now, the egg timer visual just happens to be the same as the Earth energy cycle grid. An open funnel at the top and narrowing at what is known as the void, the singularity, or the twist. It is the gate or gatekeeper, which I will explain later. As above, so below. So below the narrow funnel on the northern hemisphere at the equator, there is a narrow funnel that gradually gets wider to an open funnel in the southern hemisphere. So if Earth has a built-in egg timer shape, which is a vortex either side of the equator, in life, Earth and space, you will always find repeating patterns, and this is how I helped save Kim potentially hundreds of hours of work with the now Kim's system. As once you see a pattern, it always repeats on many levels. So this brings us to stage 2. The Earth itself being in a vortex within its own time-space that is not fixed, as our calendar year has changed at least 4 times in the past. Starting out at 13 months of 20 days and a year span of 260 days, which means the Earth cycled the Sun in 260 days, not 365, which means the Earth was nearer. Now it's further away. And in the past, the final date of the year was December the 21st. There was no 22nd through 31st. And the calendar year started in March, not January. And the evidence of which is the months September through December, as all are named after numbers, Sept being 7 through Decem, which means 10. 7, 8, 9 and 10 months. And our calendar of year, of course, now is 365 and a quarter days per year. And the quarter every 4 years creates a leap year and added on to February. Now, THI Arizona will understand this next part better, as I described it with a visual I drew out for them and explained it in detail. If Ramona and Michelle can get the first drawing ready. Everything in the universe is made up of a frequency wave. Light and sound are frequency waves. But how those waves interact then builds chemical and alchemical reactions or mutations of the wave to create something new. And if you overlap the waves, it can produce an effect which we know today as holographic. A hologram is just an overlay of the same picture or scene replicated in slightly different orientation. So now we will look at the visual aspect of the show to aid you in understanding this more. If you now look at drawing A, you will see the organic wave and how it starts at the bottom and goes up. If you now look at drawing B, you will see the inorganic wave and how it starts at the top and then goes down. The two waves may look the same, but how they interact means they're not. If you look now at drawing C, you will see how both frequency waves interact. One goes up, one goes down, intersecting waves, and in this state creates distortion. Look at the waves in an ocean. The wave goes up and then down, not down and then up. It's the same effect. Now if you look at drawing D, it is the drawing C turned 90 degrees. If you look at drawing E, it is a smaller section of D and now becomes the figure 8, which looks like the egg timer analogy given earlier. The drawing F is the up and down vortex described earlier. Now in the middle of E and F, there is a line at the centre. On the left is west, on the right is east. These are the gates described also in the Yellow Rose of Texas videos. Now the top part of the figure 8, or vortex in terms of time, is around 13,000 years. When added to the bottom, it becomes 26,000 years plus a bit extra, maybe due to time spent in the void or singularity at the middle. And this corresponds with the Mayan calendar, which is the most bizarre thing for sleepers and non-thinkers alike, because no one asks of how did they develop or create that clock. If someone decided to mark the time on that clock from, say, day 1, and it took 26,000 years to complete, and it would take another 26,000 years of monitoring to realise there is a pattern, and a further 26,000 years to confirm the pattern. So that clock in and of itself for an Earth human observer to create would take 78,000 years to build. Take note of the 78,000 years part for later, as it will come up again. But the modern churches, archaeologists, theologians and philosophers backed by clown operators like Darwin insist for the most part that life was only started here 6,000 years ago. This despite Göbekli Tepe being 11,000 years old and the pyramids 25,000 years old minimum, and the Sphinx is older again. The Sphinx was there before it. And if you think hunter-gatherers built either of them, think again, because that conspiracy theory makes zero sense. So back to the egg timer, and as the sand drops from the top and spirals towards the void, if you are in the sand falling, the east is on the left and the west is on the right. But what happens if you flip the egg timer back up? With you in the sand from the bottom, now right side up, the east is on the right and the west is on the left. Could this possibly be explained by pole shifts in the past? What about the talk of the sun rising in the west and not the east in the past also? What if it happened every 13,000 years, or maybe the 26,000 years cycle? The way out is east. Where to, I'll reveal in a later part. The west is back into the loop again, and a repeat cycle. So what if every 13,000 years they revolved the vortex, and what was north now became south, and vice versa? What was on the left is now on the right, and the west gate becomes the popular and only path to take. Now, as I understand it, this planet and solar system has been in 6 loops, and each loop is 13,000 years, which is the top half of the egg timer or vortex, which is also the half cycle of the Mayan calendar. And if you do 6 loops of 13,000 years, you then come to the figure I mentioned earlier, which is 78,000 years. Coincidence that the minimum time to create the Mayan calendar is also the length of the time of the 6 loops of 78,000 years? I think not. So this tells me whoever gave the Mayans the calendar was also giving them the time that we would be trapped inside the loops and up to us to decode it. I decoded it for myself. I'm sure many others around the world also did the same. Around 2013 and 14 time. And has released parts of it in shows over time since. I also got downloads of the drawings A through D to work out and make sense of it all around 2013 as well. So when you go back to drawing C, what you are seeing is a succession of figure 8s on its side. These are the loops. Now, what popular New Age program has this same symbol? Is said to be of peace and happiness. The figure 8 on its side and known as the Mobius loop. But the Mobius loop is not a free-flowing energy stream. It passes through an intersection where the void is, and it can be changed, flipped, reversed or siphoned depending on your perspective. So why is it called the peace and happiness symbol? Well, perhaps the word games applies to the first word. Is it peace, P-E-A-C-E, or is it peace, P-I-E-C-E? Happiness is for those at the gate, or known as the gatekeepers, as they harvest all the energy flow. And as the pattern always repeats, the gatekeepers of the banking system harvested all that energy also. As above, so below. As within, so without. Also, the Mobius loop is defined only by a two-dimensional representation of it. Please post the Mobius loop picture. And so with the two-dimensional representation of it, and so it looks all flat and like a racetrack. But in 3D, the intersection is elevated and tipped to one side, likely the west. And perhaps this can explain why it is said humans and angels alike fell. Look at the Mobius loop picture. And so this is where I feel that people are tricked with a two-dimensional representation of the Mobius loop. Now, to acquire any flow of correct energy or frequency, you must have a clockwise motion to do so. How can you know or have a clockwise motion on a Mobius loop? Where is the beginning? Where is the end? What is up? What is down? What is east? And what is west? The answer is you can't. And the error is seeing it in a two-dimensional format. And this is what has gone on within so many alt media circles via New Age, religious, Wiccan, Druid and Celtic circles. They have often reversed the flow and or the spell into something nefarious. Whether through lack of knowledge or by devious means, the result ends the same and is ultimately helping the dark forces. In many cases, they reversed the spell of dark symbols represented as light symbols and vice versa. And then we have the light and dark symbols, stating one is light and one is dark. And the classic example being the yin and the yang. Most people view that as black and white and duality, and yet miss the triality portion of it, as both sides create a whole and a ring around both, making a circle, which then binds both. It is the ring or the circle that binds, just like the wedding ring, just like the Lord of the Rings, which is now Rothschilds, formerly Solomon. And we will see another ring that binds later in the show. The blue, red, black and green rings are all binding the people who wear them to the dragon groups and their reptile or serpent overlords that reigns above them particular groups. But the yin and yang symbols are Rahu and Ketu, and both are dark forces bodies. Another example of this, perhaps the biggest of which, is the word magic. Both are not for our benefit, neither light nor dark. Magic is achieved by using an external source with which to accomplish the said magic, mostly the dark-based jinn realm, who carry out the magic tricks and spells. But it comes at a price, always at a price. Those who gain from it or use those practices pay heavy costs, not always recognizable to begin with, but later most definitely, whether this lifetime or their future lifetimes. Spells and contracts, like covenants and testaments, are all binding agreements of which too few comprehend and even fewer understand. Now, if you really wish to understand magic and its consequences with elements of the loop and reincarnation thrown in, go and view Once Upon a Time on Netflix. It is a long series, 7 seasons I believe, but each season reveals more and you will end it with a greater understanding of it. Now, over more recent times, I received the download of the One-on-One with the One, and stated it has many connotations, and I have revealed some of them. The male and the female with source was the main example, where the male archetype and the female archetype was connected directly to source. But after the fall of the female and another binding ceremony of being contracted to the moon, along with Lilith and the Kali Ma worship. But the one-on-one with the one also applied as a rival to a binary style code, which then had other implications for computing and also the quantum system. With the female fallen, the code read 1-0-1. But with our cut-off from source, it read 1-0-0, and more binary code and not trinary. When all was in alignment, we had the drawing labelled G. Go back to the first document, you will see the drawing G. 2 pyramids, as above and so below, which is essentially the inner space of the drawing labelled F and inverted, the male on the top and the female on the bottom, which is reversible. But with the female fallen, they called it the fall of man, and by man it means both genders. And so with the man falling, the top pyramid slipped halfway down the female pyramid, and you are left with the drawing H. The drawing H looks familiar, of course. It is the Egyptian, not Israeli, 6-pointed star that signifies the fall of man. Why would the Egyptian or Israeli groups have the same symbol that represents the fall of man, because the entities and in part humans connected to those groups are the very ones who led and contributed to the fall of man. Here is why. I call them the Hebrew Anunnaki group. But which variety of Anunnaki were they? In this case, the reptile group. There was 5 groups in total of Anunnaki, not one. 2 humanoid, 1 avian, not blue chickens, 1 insect group, and the reptile group. That same symbol is what is placed on Solomon's ring. So why did Solomon have this symbol and ring? Because he danced with the dark and their demonic entities is why. And they ruled over man, is what it is stating. Solomon, Herod, Indian cultures, native tribes, Celtic and Druidic tribes all followed the same practice of sacrifice of humans to these dark forces gods. These are your gods and lords within the Bible and other scripture writings. It becomes more obvious as you read yourself through the scriptures with an open mind and the possibility of these gods not being our real God or source. Solomon, like Moses, like the 6-pointed star, like Herod and the Israelites, all came from Egypt and the cult of Ra, which was preceded by the jet black race in India and also parts of Africa, poisoning people with their voodoo and ritual burning sacrifices of humans. The word Holocaust is symbolic of their rituals. Holocaust means burnt offering. The burnt offering was human and some animals, which was then offered to appease the gods. The question remains is, what God would do that to his own creations? The book's littered with many examples of that type of violence on humans. Voodoo, whilst it also appears to be genetic-based as well, is in part aligned with the magic game mentioned earlier. Which religion celebrates the fall of man by worshipping Lilith, half woman, half serpent? Remember the Lord sending down fiery serpents for the people walking through the desert with Moses, which is a title, not a name, and connect the dots to Lilith and the serpents. Which religion shows and states such disdain for all men, women and children that are not part of their cult? The answer to both questions is the Talmud and what is known as the Jewish religion. But these people practicing this are not Jews, and perhaps in some cases not human either. The 6-pointed star also played a role in the old banking system. And by old, I mean since the past 4 years. That old system has now been destroyed, and a new one is currently being built. The new system of which will not be ready until the right conditions or intentions on a few levels prevail. Currently, those conditions or parameters are not in place. The whole banking system was a six-pointed star, like the Ring of Solomon, both ran or owned by Rothschild's family, but not for long it won't. It is not a coincidence or a coincidence that the Rothschild's family DNA contains the most reptile DNA on the planet. Think Draco. Given they and their biblical gods and lords have ran this planet for 16,500 years, not the Rothschilds, that is the more modern version per se, bearing in mind the Rothschilds is another title and not a family name. And with the peace treaty in place from 2016, what has changed? Well, technically, humans are now in charge of this planet. But in have come 2 or 3 races to stake their claims again on the human race, and the details of which will be in the next section of this show. Let my people go. And here's why. Back in time, there was 26 different races that seeded humans via genetics with their genes. And this was for the sole purpose of ownership of those humans and the parts of the planet they occupied. The irony of the word just used, soul, spelt S-O-L-E, is indicative in pronunciation terms, as many off-world came here for the soul, S-O-U-L, as well. Their ultimate goal for their host possession game is to find out how to place 2 souls in the one vessel. To date, they have failed. And this goes back to the geneticists of Atlantis, and likely Antlantis also. There was not just one event or time period of that name. They started to meddle in genetics, and we ended up with humans with differing DNA, and also crossbreeding of species that are declared as myths, known as chimera, half man and half beast. The world of misinformation will tell you these were myths, and yet are there not examples of these chimeras all over the hieroglyphs in Egypt, of course? Half man, half bird, half man, half spy, cat, half man, half goat, half man, half dog, half man, half crocodile, and the list goes on. Are we to believe these ancient pharaohs indulged in fancy dress at all their ceremonies, or were these entities actually real? The answer is they are and were real. Another chimera is half man, half bull. And then we have the term papal bull, which means Father Bull is God. Papa, Father, Al, God, Bull. And then they tell you to believe and buy into the book called the Bible. All in the words once you decode it. Now the bull is a representation in the sky of the constellation Taurus. It may be indicative where those entities originated from. Here is, if you haven't pondered on a lot already, here's another pondering. What if your star sign is where you originated from? I can feel the cogs of the brains twitching and clicking away. Has anybody asked, why do we need star signs for our birth date? Does it make any sense? Why are we born under constellations outside of our own solar system, and in some cases outside of our own galaxy? Something to ponder on. So, with the peace treaty now in place, interference between non-human and human is declared out of bounds. And yet the shit here persists, and seems like the council wants to do little to stop it, or is washing its hands of it. I would like to be proven wrong. For all those waiting on Pleiadians, Arcturians, and other alleged benevolent beings, including the Avian group, and no, they're not blue. That was a fictional story made up by Corey Goode and his wife and her $6,000 teeth to gain fame, and Wilcock, despite knowing it was fake, went along with it for a multi-$1,000 deals with the Coven-based show known as Gaia TV. Anyone appearing on that show or giving that site money is paying for the Covens, who are dark magicians, to damage more humans with their dark magic tricks. Period. All those waiting for the ETs to save and help us, they have all, yes, you heard that right, all been involved at some point in this genetic ownership of humans game. And we have to be ultra careful of what their real motives are. To date, none overall have served us well. That doesn't mean they're all bad in every species, but their top echelons have all ran nefarious programs on us and many other beings over a prolonged period of time. They've hunted down the Lyrans from millions of years ago. The Lyrans were the original human. They've hunted down the Aryans as well, which I will reveal in another show. Space brothers and sisters may all sound lovely and family-like, but as we all know, family members are often the ones that damage you the most. But what if, having lost the contract with and on humans recently, with the peace treaty, the question to ask is there a potential for them to run another of their genetics control games on us, using ignorant humans and their consent to anything without knowing or realizing the consequences? We don't have to look far or too deep for that potential happening in an up-and-coming event, do we? Some are saying now or thinking, what does he mean? Think COVID. Think vaccines. Think DNA manipulation. Think off-world skullduggery. It's all there. And all are potentially another round of consented contracts by default, due to a lack of knowledge and people's inability to think for themselves, and a propensity to follow all orders from authorities who have no interest in us whatsoever. They all sold out. Those you perceive as being an authority are mere puppets in a much larger game and scale. Your police, legal system, governments, Bilderbergers, Trilateral, 300 Committee, Club of Rome, agency clowns and military all declared to be the lead authorities, except they are not and have never been anywhere near the top of the authority tree, and neither has the deep state. In fact, most know less about the bigger picture than all of you who listen to our shows. So now we go deeper, and the main reason for this extra show, and will possibly be a first to reveal it in this format, and will require deeper thinking and pondering on. But first we have to go back a bit on my explanation back in 2015 of the two worlds, which I said applied on a few levels, not just one. Like I said, find a pattern and it always repeats. Now, people back then, when I first put it out, were a bit bemused by the two-world theory, but over time have realised what it meant and also entails. In fact, many of you have made comment on one aspect of it becoming crystal clear since the lockdown was imposed. The two worlds applies to two separate earths in the physical and the non-physical realms. We have the physical earth which we are upon, and the astral etheric earth which many on this planet inhabit also. Ponder on that. The Native Americans described this as dancing between two worlds, the latter of which is in part the spirit world. Again, the spirit world is said to be of benefit to many, and again we have found out that to be more misinformation. The dance with the fallen spirit world leads to lasting and damaging implications for those who seek it via drugs or plant potions. Throw in rhythmical spirit dancing along with mandalas and chanting, and all leads the participant down a dangerous path some never recover from. At the very least, it takes years to wind back the damage of drugs and plant potions, longer if the entities attach and stick around a while. And it always contains remnants within you following the use of those drugs or potions. Now, the Mandela effect is easily described when you apply the two worlds narrative to it. And what this means is that the two worlds are not exactly the same, only similar. it can also be seen as two separate timelines as well. Now, people often experience these Mandela events and often pass them off as themselves having an off day, forgetful, absent-minded, or perhaps going nuts. No. You have witnessed the two worlds. Often in the dream time, you visit a place familiar to you in the wake time. But it's not exactly the same, is it? Some things are out of place. People within that scene don't match to the event, time or place. And it is passed off as a vivid imagination and strange or bad dreams. But what if they're not? What if your dreams are real? I think most who listen to this show are now familiar with the fact they are more real than previously thought. Strange entities and beings attended them, strange worlds also, including the purple sky planet with the red ring around it that looks like Saturn. The purple sky planet. The plant world with infinity pools and satyrs. The castle on the hill with the Elvira looking woman. And the gold ziggurat world with their dungeons. Some of that list may have triggered deep memories within you. It was meant to. Happy pondering on them. Most of these strange entities in your dreams are dismissed as not real. But you cannot imagine something that doesn't already exist. I will repeat that again. You cannot imagine something that doesn't already exist. Ponder on that as well. The two worlds can also be described on another level. Those who think and those that don't. Those of higher vibration and those with lower vibration. Those awake and those asleep are all other examples of the two worlds. You could also throw in those who are organic and those who are inorganic, those who are human and those who are bots, synth or host possessed. All examples of the two worlds and also the duality. But have we pondered on what is the triality aspect? Before we delve into that, we have to go back again a bit of the one-on-one with the one. And this has a few components to it as stated, male and female with source, and it also applies with the quantum system when implemented correctly. But can one-on-one with the one apply to the two worlds theory, and if so, how? We go back again, and something that grew in popularity in the past couple of decades, particularly amongst the New Age circles and their largely woo-woo rhetoric, and that of the New Earth. In those circles, it is stated that we would all be transported in vast tin cans or teleported to this new 5D Earth world. And that none of the love and light people, or the ones that didn't follow love and light, would all be left behind. Now, there's a few things wrong with that. The spirit soul vessel can travel anywhere with the right frequency and soul development instantaneously, without the need for tin cans. Even with light speed travel in tin cans, it often requires cryogenics to accomplish travel from one star system to another. And that is the main mode of travel until the celestial needles are returned. That requires the collection and placing of specific crystals by one person or a number of persons of higher frequency. And when that happens, this planet and its inhabitants are then connected directly to 4 constellations for travel. But has anyone stated what or where is 5D? Why is it presumed it will be all love and light and fantastic on the new world? People, by and large, haven't fixed themselves on this world yet. Too few have attained higher mental plane status, and we need to correct that first before travelling to and messing up other worlds with our childlike thinking. One final part to add to this before revealing the new theory is we go back to the loops and the Mobius loop system again, where we were trapped in that timeline and loop for 78,000 years. That loop system was ended in the time period of 2013 through 2014. And we started our descent into a different and differing field of frequency, vibration, timeline, time-space, energy and path. We have all felt this in differing ways, and also times during the past 8 years, and have gained an understanding of it all and our place within it. I said 8 years because 2012 was, of course, a much-mentioned date. Fear and doom merchants were out in full battle gear, espousing the end is nigh and the biblical Armageddon was coming. And basically, well, you're all going to die. We're all going to die. Except there was a dead man from 2,000 years ago who was going to rise from the dead and save us all again. What a conspiracy theory that is. But in essence, they were in part right, but not for the reasons most knew. The first reason was 2012 was a cut-off of a plan by Marduk and others to harvest this planet in totality and then destroy it, which they'd done to many other worlds, including ruining their own, I might add. And that was referenced in my very first most listened to show, The Future of Humanity, back in June 2013 time. And yes, it coincided with the 2012 Mayan calendar, as it's called, but I suspect it's not Mayan at all, but off, on and in-world controllers. At the same time, Another piece of technology which they used for their advantage was the looking glass tech, which when observed of the possibilities of what could happen, who are the potential players and what are the scenarios or events. If 11 of the 12 who used that device predicted an event or person, there was a 90% plus chance of that event or persons having an effect. Both Kim and I were flagged in the looking glass tech as potentials for certain events or actions, according to Kim. This then allowed them to monitor, interfere or target by suspicious methods. I suspect they thought they could control or cajole Kim into their ways and methods. And that likely worked for a bit, as I think Kim was lured in by the title of the trustee at first, until she started seeing things that didn't fit, and that ultimately led her down a different path, and then on to working with me and others. But in 2012, the looking glass technology failed, and that device no longer works. And I covered that in the Future of Humanity as well, as to why things would improve much as time moves on, or even in. The looking glass was showing static from 2012 onwards. That tells you it is not in the right frequency zone. And something else I reference in that show, not the same timeline or time-space either. We and this planet were on the move, and none of their tech or major plans would no longer work, as stated back then, 2013. I think many now see that as a proven statement. Clowns will and have always and will always try to repeat programs and plans, but they will all fail and have failed, as they will just not accept their time is up and a new way and path is waiting to unfold. And essentially, at the end of 2012, our time had... Right. So now, having gone through the background of the loops, Mobius loop, vortices, how energy flows one-on-one with the one, two worlds, time clocks, looking glass tech, we now arrive at a new theory. And it's up to you all whether you believe it, see it, or experience it. But some questions first. How does the one-on-one with the one apply to the Earth itself? How can you explain repeated time, events, people, and timelines? How can you explain time travel? Is time travel available elsewhere? Is it available here? With regards to the last question, no, we don't have time travel devices here, and any attempt to build one will come with severe consequences for those involved in it and the devices or buildings making it. We do not need time travel, as the only people who benefit from those devices are the dark forces. The past is the past, and should be observed only as lessons for the future. Changing the past never alters the eventual outcome, even within the recorded loops. The Mandela effect will kick in and will change landscapes and players, but the outcomes within the recording ultimately end up with the same effect. And I have come to that conclusion after I have spoken to many people who have experienced all the 6 loops. Their path, roles, genders may have changed over time, but the suffering, perhaps karma, and outcomes were all singing from the same hymn sheet until they changed themselves. This timeline is about correcting your own past, not only this lifetime, but your past lifetimes, with the added feature this time to correct family lines. Some family lines will not be going forward in the next phase. Why is it the younger generations of the elite family lines don't wish to carry on the dark psychotic behaviour of the parents, grandparents and ancestors? Because that time is up, is why. A long time in the past, there was an event on this planet where high-end tech was deployed, and this planet and its mother was split in 2. It is suspected it was related to the destruction of Tiamat, but not confirmed. And no, Tiamat was not all love and light either. Humanity was in much pain. Wars largely not connected to us and more to do with the other beings was ravaging the planet, and humans were offered a deal. The deal was a trap. The humans would go in suspended animation known as sleeping pods, whilst they prepared the quote, new earth, unquote. But A, it was not new, and B, it was not for our benefit. Upon awakening, the human took what is described in the series The 100 as the City of Light pill. In essence, this pill is a memory wipe. No pain, no trauma, no guilt, no shame, all erased by this pill. And most took it as a way out of not dealing with the current conditions. This is not a pill per se, but technology. Temporarily, it may bring relief, and I'm sure many of you have faced that situation in this lifetime and wanting to take a pill to take everything away. And in essence, this is why people do drugs and alcohol to excess. They are placebo, City of Light pills, but of a shorter duration. But as you all know, it doesn't take away the pained emotions experienced for long, and the high is followed by the enormous low, until you repeat the self-abuse again, and the hamster wheel cycle is continued. But the only way you are cured of your bad memories and emotions is you doing the work. All other ways are a masking of the problem, and all problems return unless they are dealt with. And this is why THI is focused heavily on the shadow and inner work, and many in our group have. Those that haven't become more obvious to you now, as you have developed the self, the more you will see. It is often painful to view those that haven't, and the great desire is to help them. But you can't help people who won't help themselves, and it becomes an exercise of ultimate futility. No one can do shadow work for you. Only you can do that. But the protector in me tried to do that with some people in my life over the years, and they are now departed from my life. I tried to shield them, glossed over their inner issues, and in effect facilitated their own internal failures. That was wrong on my part. And ultimately they fell within themselves when it caught up with them, and more so after my input was withdrawn. I take responsibility for that, but I cannot and will not accept their behaviours and lack of their own work. That is down to them, and for them to correct or face the consequences of not doing so. Whilst humanity slept, the dark forces presented as the saviours went about playing their games at our expense. So how does this all fit in? Whereby we tie in the Mobius loop, the two worlds, the frequency overlays, time, and our possible future. Well, the first clue was the Mobius loop, looked at in two-dimensional aspects, but it's not flat. And the space in the middle is, and was not, flowing at all, but it was twisted into a knot, which created a locked door and an open door effect. The locked door is in essence the east gate, the open door, and follow the false light and enter the reincarnation loop chambers along with the memory wipes, was in effect the west gate. This is symbolic of the letter N in capital form, or the wave motion we described of the left-hand path, which has no gate, and is decorated with the false luminaries known as the Illuminati. Left-hand path is west, right-hand path is east. It's the same concept. The Illuminati have been duped as well. Just saying. Although they are so filled with their fake titles, pieces of paper with numbers on, materialistic items, alleged superior blood and DNA, and their own self-importance, they struggle to accept it at this time, and they fight on not for control, but for their own demise. One day they will realise that fact, and it is all of their own making and stupidity. Perhaps if any of them are listening to this show, go back to the Future of Humanity show I did in 2013 and tell me it's not correct. So with the two worlds trapped in the Mobius loop, connected by etheric and astral cords, mired in spinning around the hamster wheel of life, it is no wonder the planet and its inhabitants descended into savagery and out of touch with reality. They say the definition of unsanity is repeating the same things and expecting a different result. This is an analogy of the loops. It was the same 13,000 year sequence repeated over and over again. We at THI are charting a new path of not repeating the old world path thinking, programs and ways by creating a vision of a new way that is all inclusive of the all. Those who wish to remain exclusive will continue to flail and fail, of which many of you now are witnessing in others for yourselves. But here's the kicker. You can get outside of the Mobius loop and time, providing you develop the self. You can be outside of the system, outside of time, and observe and react accordingly from the mental plane codes. From that position, you can see the bigger picture and work out the puzzles of life and people. Some may say the observer can be judgmental, but that is self-reflective commenting. As to be able to observe the wider picture, you have to have gone within enough to develop those skill sets. Without those skill sets, you are stuck in the fog of time and the repeat looped pattern behaviours. There is a big difference to observing and absorbing. Those absorbing think the observers and subsequently those who have developed themselves to be able to do that role become the target of those not developed enough via shadow work or mired in the 3D loop of competitive and comparative mindsets. So, humanity got stuck in these loops with a twisted knot at the centre. The knot is the void, the singularity. It is the all, and it is the nothing. And that field comes down to you and your choices. But those choices were given and also taken away. So how did the loop not? K-N-O-T. Well, our motion in following our star is not a circular orbit, but a spiral dance trailing behind it, and so the knot got tighter until a solution to unlock the knot was developed and then carried out. All the characters, players, time and timelines needed to be in order to achieve this task, and 2013 through 2014 provided that opportunity, and the knot was undone. Essentially, 2012 was the end of the cycle, and then a new phase was about to unfold. Will we repeat the cycle or end it? We ended it, and that is why the Looking Glass failed after 2012. So, what happens next, you may all ask? Well, at the time, there was a number of potentials, but none were proven or definitive. But we did break the chain. Right, the finale. In the past few years, I've been shown many visions and scenarios, of which many came to fruition in 3D. One vision showed me and someone else on what at the time I thought was the same world. But it appears later it was the two separate worlds. The two of us were each holding a chain that was connected to the planet, and that planet was Earth. With the same visual of the Earth you would get from a craft in a satellite level orbit, you would see the whole Earth. I was holding on to the chain and was told to let it go. I was reluctant to do so, as I did not have the understanding or bigger picture at that juncture in time. I fought it initially and then let go. And the Earth fell away into the distance and went into a dark void or portal. I think the other person let go of their chain as well as the Earth fell and ultimately disappeared, but I did not see that actually take place. The pain, the sorrow, and the sense of loss was enormous within the vision state, and that was replicated for weeks in the 3D waking time as well. There was a sense we had lost the battle for and of the planet, but that was quickly overcome as I processed it all and came to another realization. Well, the bulk of us are all still here, even with that Earth fallen away. But at the same time pondering on why I was still seeing and visiting another Earth, and why we still had two worlds. So I went deeper and gained more understanding. More pieces to the puzzle arrived in many forms, and a new picture started to emerge. I put more pieces of the puzzle together and was asking the right questions and got some answers in return, but some I had to make sense of myself when the time was right. I was drawn to watching a series called Dark. Although it's not a riveting series in many ways, I knew there was clues within it which would lead me to a conclusion and an actionable event. That conclusion is, there is not two worlds, but three worlds. And I started frantically writing stuff down in volumes. My thought processes, solutions, ideas, and all the possibilities it brings. And one word triggered my puzzles altogether, and that word was trifecta. Please post picture 1. So as you can see, the trifecta. I and we had focused only on the loop worlds and the Mobius. But by developing the self onto the mental planes, you can be outside of the loop and time and see. I said more with C in 2020, and we have, based on the levels each person is viewing from and the levels of development and understanding. Within the past month, a new vision emerged, and I saw a similar vision of another planet fallen, and this one was on fire. It was charred all over and still burning in certain regions of it. I did not get the same emotions that I had with the first vision, and was kind of comfortable with that fallen and that vision, which suggested my theory was now coming into view. See picture 2. Can you please post picture 2? That is the triquetra in 2D form. In 3D form, it's not actually connected anymore to the untangled Mobius loop. Picture 1 shows that unlooping, or the knot untied. Prepare picture 3, please. Some people will say that is like the Celtic triquetra, which can be seen in picture 3. Except in the middle there is a ring, which is the bind and also the contract. And not a good symbol. Once you look closely, like the yin and yang, their symbols always show the binding, yet many can't see it or completely miss it. So how do we make sense of all this? Well, here goes. The third world, or Earth, is the real and organic world we all once inhabited before the city of light pills. And maybe we made a mess of. Not confirmed. Via confusion, laziness, certainly lazy-mindedness, seducement or coercion, we ended up on a copy world, which then split into 2 worlds. All the life and energy, that of which is organic, is mired in with the overlay frequencies described earlier, drawing C, which was inorganic, and we all danced in the soup of illusion and trickery. But some started seeing the new world. Some even went to visit it. Some oversaw the regeneration of it in ready for a future event. Let's go back a bit to the harvesting 2 worlds wrapped in a knot in the centre, with energy spiraling on both sides, and suddenly the knot is released. What happens next? Well, as both sides are descending the egg timer towards the centre, the spiral downward speeds up. This creates a lot of tension at the knot, and it builds up. And then as the knot is released, the energies conducive releases in a giant spurt and pushes out through the open door or gate. And then joins the new world. See picture 1 again for the visual of that effect. This is like a spark of creation and is also a replica of what they call the Big Bang as well. An explosion of light, energy and consciousness pushes through into the higher densities and more conducive to higher development and evolution. The source energies released added to the mix and was in essence a filter system. Think of it in terms of the wheat and the chaff. We have had and experienced a number of these filtering events over the past 2 years, and it is preparation for a future event as such. With the incoming G cloud and GNA, which is best for organic life only, that collision will kickstart a sequence of events and changes within you and around you. What will unfold, one can only speculate on. No one is given the full details, as that doesn't allow for free will and also interactions with it. No one knows the date either, no matter how many tell you that via New Age channelers and their bullshit scripts garnered from voice-to-head technology. No one knows the date. Once the transition happens, the harvesting machine and their technology to support that system will end once and for all, and can only be brought back by ourselves being stupid. We must learn the lessons of the past and build a better future for our species, many of which is contained within the guidelines of the People's Club. As above, so below. How to be, how to act, think and act different, caring and sharing, cooperative, not co-pirating, inclusive, not exclusive, need, not greed, helping each other and not playing the comparative, competitive mind games. All as equals, not in hierarchy. Adult thinking, not childlike thinking, with egos in balance. Only when the bulk of our people operate under that banner will we then be able to venture to the new world and new worlds out in space. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. I'll see you all on Thursday. Final word. Space is not the final frontier. It is and was our home.